meeting. So we'll stay on schedule. Good evening. This is, what is this? Wednesday, August 25th. Meeting of the Community Preservation Act Committee. As a preliminary matter, please note that this meeting is being recorded and some of the attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you. Anything you decide to screen share on your computer or anything you broadcast will be captured and recorded. I'm Tim Wheeler, Chairman of the Community Preservation Act Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons are present and can hear me prior to going any further. So Caroline, you're here.
Yep.
And Elaine, you're here. And MJ, you're here. And Julie is here momentarily. Yes, there she is. Perfect. With a quorum of the committee present, I will call the meeting to order at 7:35. The open meeting of the Community Preservation Act Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency. Specific information and guidelines for the remote participation by members of the public can be found on the Town of Berlin website. That's enough of that. If anybody wants to make sure we're legal, they'll be able to find out we were. Minutes, did we have minutes?
We did not, well, not that I shared.
Okay,
Again, last minute Larry, today I was like, oh, I don't think I did those. But I'll have them for the next meeting. I'll have both.
all right. Now, we got a note from Stuart Weller from the Community Preservation Coalition. Have you finished submitting your community preservation projects report, your CP3 report, to the state? If not, you only have 1 month left to do so before the September 15th deadline. If you don't complete your CP3 report by the state mandated deadline, there will be a delay in receiving your community CPA trust fund disbursement from the Department of Revenue. So make sure to get all your CPA project data entered soon. And I talked to Linda Galoni from Hudson, who's on their committee today, and she said, basically, you report on what you spent money on, and of course we didn't. So I'll file a report that just says there were no expenditures for projects, and then we'll be sure to comply and get our money on it in a timely fashion. So I wanted to let you know about that.
It's called the CP3 report.
CP30.
Yeah.
There's evidently, she said there's a CP-1, a CP-2, and a CP-3. So it must be community preservation 1, 2, and 3. 1 and 2 are filed by the town accountant. And so I'll check in with June and make sure that she's following up on that. And then the only notice we got is in regard to the CP3 projects. And there's a link here I can click on, and it'll allow us to just say no activity in this first year.
Awesome.
So I'll do that, and I'll check with June and make sure that whatever she's got to file, she files as well. Does anybody else have any other business we need to tend to before we start the hearing?
Only business I'll have to attend to is the fact that I'm actually stuck at work and will need to count some things. All my guys went on vacation for 2 weeks, so I am on day 12 of 18 working in a row.
Oh
Really?
my gosh.
All right. So if you disappear for a minute, we'll understand why.
Yeah,
Good. Well, we appreciate your being here and making sure we have a quorum.
yes.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yes.
Okay. Are we, I don't know if you covered this because I joined a couple seconds late, but before the hearing, are we gonna have anybody do any accounting for this fund or be in charge of that?
Say that again?
Are we gonna have anyone that's taking lead on the accounting aspect of the funds? So meaning tracking, so that it'll be available to everybody on the board, what's going out, what's coming in some sort of format that's accessible for everybody to view?
That's interesting. We can check on what other towns are doing.
Hmm.
I mean, June theoretically would be able to give us an exact accounting, but it would probably be good for us on a quarterly basis anyway, to review what funds we've got stashed in our different accounts.
Right.
And then,
Yes.
so maybe it's just a request to June that on a quarterly basis, she gives us an update, particularly going forward, because as you begin to expend money in the future, in 2022 and stuff, having an accounting that's quarterly anyway probably would make sense. Is that all right with folks?
Yeah, especially as our different boards want to look at projects, it would be helpful to know how much money is available.
Yeah. So would we want that posted on our page on the town's website, or would we just want to deliver that to committee members and they can take it back to their respective committees that they represent? What do you think?
Think that's sufficient to just give it to the people involved so they can take it back to their committees.
Yeah.
I mean, will we be in the town report after this?
We were in the town report this time, just outlining what we were up to, but yeah, I would think in the future, we'd outline what money was apprehended from the state, what money we generated through the fee. And then what funds were expended. I mean, that would form the basis to some degree of the report we give to the state as part of this CP3 thing.
But isn't anyone's allowed to submit an application? So if the Boy Scouts wanted to submit something, they could.
Yep. Other bodies can, and private individuals can. If you owned a historic structure,
Yeah.
if it was deemed by the Historic Commission to be in the public benefit, or there's some other criteria. We were talking about that earlier. But I think the Historic Commission has a certain amount of authority in determining whether a private application could be considered for funding. So someone might very well have a historic home that's on the register that they wanted to have some activity on, and they could ask for funds.
So then
And
if we, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So if we don't post the fund, and I can see the hesitancy to do that, but if we don't post the funds, and how would people know that aren't on the committees what's available?
Well, I don't think we want to have people feel as though they shouldn't apply. I don't think it ought to be based on what they target as available. That we want to encourage people to be throwing ideas on the table with their pre-application all the time.
But I don't know how, I wouldn't know if I wasn't involved in this. And I didn't read the town report, how much is available, you know what I mean? What figures these really are, because they are very large.
Right,
You know what I mean? So people are thinking about projects and then they may say, well, that's, $50,000, that's so much, when that money, is potentially there, for something. I'm using the Boy Scouts as an example that they, could use it for, you know what I'm saying? But they have to be able to access that figure before they kind of even start the planning process. Otherwise, why would you begin the planning process if you don't even know? It's a shot in the dark, right?
well, so historic preservation, housing and rec and open space each get their allocated amount, 10%. Then the 70% that we dump either into the fund balance, which allows us then to access it during the year without, you've still got to go to a town meeting, but you can be in a precarious position in the fall of the year when, I don't know, the accountant can't certify the cash or whatever, there's some hoop there. That allows us to continue to access that money. That we could certainly say that was the sum that was available in that fund balance. Because it's not going to be till a town meeting that gets dipped into. So we
Right.
might very well say there's, $650,000 available in that particular fund or something like that. So anyway, yeah, but we can talk about that some more.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, on a quarterly basis, we want to reflect ourselves and then we can report back to the committees we represent. But you're saying, how does the public gain access to that as well? So.
Correct.
Yeah, we can work on that one. It's 7:45. We have a public hearing. So I guess I'm supposed to read this statement again. Because this is a new meeting, right? So good evening. This is Wednesday, August 25th, meeting of the Community Preservation Act Committee, and we're about to hold a public hearing on the Community Preservation Plan. As a preliminary matter, please note that this meeting is being recorded and some of the attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you. Anything you decide to screen share on your computer or anything you broadcast will be captured and recorded. I'm Tim Wheeler, Chairman of the Community Preservation Act Committee, and I'm going to do a roll call again for the hearing. So we've got that noted in our minutes. So Caroline,
Here.
Carolyn, Elaine,
Here,
Julie,
Here,
and MJ is out of the picture, but he's there. I know he's there. And Tim Wheeler, I'm here. We're missing James and Eloise.
So
And it looks
Eloise
like-
is actually here.
Who is?
Well, it says town clerk.
Oh, so she's here.
Yeah. Do you want me to promote her?
Yes, please. And then we've got some participants that we can chat with later. So with the quorum open, the open meeting of the Community Preservation Act is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth. Specific information and guidelines for the remote participation by members of the public can be found on the town Berlin website. That's enough of that. I was going to ask, as we start the hearing, why don't each of you tell us who you're representing? So Carolyn?
I'm here representing the Conservation Commission.
And Elaine? Elaine? You want to tell us who you're representing?
Excuse me. Yeah, Historic Commission.
And Julie
Hi, everyone. I'm here representing Recreation Committee.
and MJ
I'm a select board appointee.
and Eloise is representing the Housing Partnership as a non-voting member at this time. And James Holyoke, who's also an at-large rep for the selectmen, is a member, but he is not here this evening at this time. Before we begin the hearing, I just wanted to give a quick little synopsis here. The Community Preservation Act allows Massachusetts cities and towns to raise monies through a surcharge of up to 3% of the real estate tax levy on real property. And as of June 2021, 187 Massachusetts cities and towns have adopted the Community Preservation Act. In our case, it was November of 2018, the residents of Berlin voted to adopt the Community Preservation Act. And through this act, the town applies a 3% surcharge on local property tax bills to set aside funds for projects that meet the CPA eligibility requirements. In addition to the local tax surcharge, the state provides matching funds, and the actual percentage varies from year to year depending on the health of the Commonwealth Community Preservation Trust Fund, which is funded by a surcharge on registry of deeds transactions. In fiscal year 2021, the state match of Berlin CPA funds was 68%, resulting in a payment to the town CPA general fund of $197,551. And this was in addition to the $290,392 from fiscal 2021 surcharge, for a total for Berlin for that particular year of $487,933. The committee consists of 7 members. That was enacted and approved back in the fall of 2020. Since that time, the committee has been working on one of its first charges, which is the creation of a community preservation plan. So we're required to study the needs, possibilities, and resources for community preservation in Berlin. And to that end, it reviews existing plans and documents bearing on the 3 purposes designated for funding under the CPA, which are open space, recreation, historic resources, and community housing. And then after adopting the CPA, a new community must develop a community preservation plan to facilitate implementation of the act. And then after the initial plan is created, the CPA committee must hold a public hearing, and then we must update the plan on an annual basis. So this is the first year we've had a plan, and this is the first hearing that we've had in order to review that. And then once it's reviewed and we take the advice of anybody that wants to share it this evening, we'll finalize the plan and the committee will vote on it, and it'll be a document that then we'll use as a tool. The plan is broken out into some key pieces, and each one of the committee members took responsibility for different parts. There's an overview which includes the plan purpose and goals. There's the decision guidelines that we're going to use with a section on the process we'll follow. Then there's sections on historic preservation, open space, and community housing, all of which outline the goals for those different enterprises. And then the application process itself with guidelines for submission, and then we include a pre-application form and an application form. So to begin, did any members of the committee have anything that they'd like to add at this point or comment on before we sort of open it up to the other 5 participants that are out there? Anyone have anything they want to add?
Well, I guess we should probably make it clear that it is a living document, that it will be updated every year. So certainly as projects get done, they will be included. And if we find that the document needs to be tweaked in any way, we have the opportunity to do that every year.
Yes, and we outlined that pretty clearly in the document itself when we, I think we stated that the goal was to make it possible for any committee in the future to modify it and adapt it as it needed to do in order to respond to the changes that we and they foresee. And in each one of those annual plans, we'll include what took place in the preceding year. And then that gets sent off. So we've got 5 attendees. And if any of those attendees care to make any comments, they can raise their hand if they've had a chance to review the plan, or if they've got just general questions about the process, we'd be happy to answer them. And Carolyn will be happy to welcome you in if you want to raise your hand. And if you don't, then that's fine too. Oh,
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 oh.
oh, it's
Hi.
competition.
I'm gonna go in order that I saw them. So first is Walter Bickford. Well,
Walter, if you unmute, you can probably talk to us now.
Mute, okay. Can
There
you
you
hear
go.
me now?
Yes, we
Yep.
can.
Okay. Here's my only concern. I know I'm a little basically familiar with what's going on with the money and who's applying for what. And my only concern is that I've seen over the years, having been a selectman and member of the conservation, planning, all that stuff. Do you people have a set of criteria in which you measure the performance of those who are applying for funding? In other words, let's say over the past 10 years, can the applicant provide proof of a tangible, measurable achievement that they have accomplished? Therefore, the point I'm getting at, I'm aware of groups that have been a failure for the town, and I can demonstrate that. But I don't want to see money thrown at the town organizations or groups that have failed over the years, the decades, and at the expense of groups that have proven themselves and have measurable accomplishments, such as the Conservation Commission, measured by the amount of land we protected, the protection of water resources and things like that. So I guess the question is as simply as I can state it. Do you have a set of criteria that you're going to judge those who are applying for funds?
So one of the preferences will be given to proposals which meet as many of the following general criteria as possible. This is on page 6 of the plan. And one of the bullets is demonstrate
Excuse me, Ben.
practicality and
Tim,
pardon?
can I get a copy of the plan?
Yep, the plan is on the Town of Berlin website.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
But anyway, so demonstrate practicality and feasibility and demonstrate that they can be implemented expeditiously and within budget. So it seems as though we've got some opportunity in language like that to say, is this an organization or a group or an individual that, has a track record that we can use as an example of their ability to carry forward this project and get it done.
Good. Thank you. When you award these, do you allow input from citizens that have had a lot of experience with different groups?
So what happens is that people come to the committee with a pre-application and
Mhm.
they say, this is what we want to use the money for.
Mhm.
And we evaluate based on what the criteria are that the state allows money to be used for. We evaluate the project and tell the individual or the group or whatever that it is within the guidelines that the state and our committee is set up.
Okay,
Then we have to make a determination as a committee as to which projects will be recommended to the town meeting floor. And we can only recommend projects that remain within the budget confines of what we've got available for cash that year. We're not going to be in a position where we're going to say, here are 5 projects, they want twice as much money as we've got available, so you on the town floor are going to decide which ones sink and which ones float. We have to, as a committee, balance a budget that's available, go to the town meeting and make a recommendation as to whether or not a project ought to be, we'll be recommending projects for approval. Now, town meeting can do 4 things. They can approve it, they can turn it down, they can reduce the amount of money that's been requested, or they can take that amount of money, not give it to that use, but put it into the fund balance, which preserves its value, but doesn't assign it to that particular project. So at town meeting, people are going to be able to make a case as to whether they think a project proponent perhaps has the capacity to push the project over the finish line.
great.
So it's
Very
not
good.
this committee is only going to sort out what we think are the best priorities for a given year, and we go to town meeting with those priorities, and then town meeting decides whether they agree with us or not.
Thank you. That's good. Thank you.
Mary's got a question.
She does. Hold on, let me put Walter back in the audience. And there you go, Mary. Mary Porter, I assume.
Right, Carolyn. Yep, that's me.
Hi.
Hi, long time no see. Tim. Yeah, I just, I did read the plan, Tim. Of course, it was like a week ago, but one of the questions I had, and it comes a bit from working on the finance side of things, is I didn't see anything in the plan about whether the intent is to deplete the fund every year. As the funds come in, is the plan to spend them? Or if you have submissions of projects and nobody likes them, do you just, I mean, I don't think the plan has a guideline of how much you want to spend each year or that sort of thing. And I'm not sure you need it, but I raise it because we've been going through that exercise in Finance Committee, and it's kind of helpful. And I don't know if the state CPA people say spend everything every year. I don't know what what's recommended, and also I guess I'm asking the question: is that something you would put in the plan if the committee determined that every year you would spend whatever funds come in that are available that year? Would you put that in the plan, or put in some kind of guidelines about spend? And the other thing, that's one question, is spending guidelines with respect to available funds, and then and looking at it, there's a cross reference to the master plan. Okay, and I realize that these things are probably available on the town website, but I know that citizens have a hard time. We actually have 2 functioning sites, one where you can find the meetings and get the links for the Zoom, and the other is, oh, here's the town of Berlin. And so I think it'd be helpful for citizens to have some cross references. So the master plan, I believe, is somewhere available electronically, but if you know, in your plan document, can you make a hyperlink? Can you make an active link to the resources that you cite? And this is really just a drafting thing, you know, Tim. It's not, that one's not a substantive comment. The other is sort of substantive to inform people of how you intend to spend available funds. yeah, you know, the timing of it. I can't imagine a year would go by where there isn't at least one worthy project coming in that, you know, you'd want to put CPA funds to. And I don't know, Eloise, I think, is on this session. Yeah, Eloise? Yeah, I don't know if we have a hyperlink in the Town of Berlin website that takes you to My Government Berlin website, but that would be really handy because I know, Tim, last night we had a citizen come on that couldn't find the whole Zoom thing, and I walked her through how to get to My Town Government, how to see the page where the meetings are all listed. So it would be kind of nice if the Berlin website had that cross-link too. That's not this committee's problem, but I'm raising it because I know Eloise is there and maybe we can get that done. I don't know. And then I had one other question. I'm looking at there's a chart. It's got the definitions: open space, historic resources, recreational. And so on that chart, it's got acquisition, creation, preservation, support, rehab, and restoration, all those other criteria. So here's a conservation question. Where does conservation restriction and/or agricultural restriction, does that fall under acquisition or preservation? Where does that fit into this chart?
You want to answer that, Carolyn?
To be honest, I feel like I would have to look at the chart. But
Yeah,
I believe that any land purchased with CPA funds does have to have an accompanying restriction.
So, right. So my question is really not that the CPA funds would use to purchase land, but would be used to create a conservation restriction. So would that follow? I'm looking at, unfortunately, you know, I've got the chart printed out because I was interested in it, but under
Right.
acquisition, it says obtain property interest by gift, purchase, devise, grant, rental purchase, lease, or otherwise. So, and then it's got an exception on eminent domain. So maybe that or otherwise would include a CR, Carolyn, a conservation restriction. I don't know.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, a conservation restriction would have to be included.
Under that category of acquisition, even though it's not an outright purchase. And you know,
So,
that's
right, I'm just trying to think of like, so under what circumstances would conservation funds be able to be used, say, for rent? And I'm not, at least off the top of my head, coming up with a scenario to then be able to intelligently answer that question.
well, maybe you want to rent some space. You know, we built a building to contain historical artifacts in this town. So maybe you'd want to rent a space to contain historical artifacts. I could see where you might, you know, that's a sort of out there proposition, but
Right. So given that scenario, I mean, a conservation restriction doesn't make sense.
no. Well, no. I just, my basic question is, where does it fit in under these definitions? And my assumption is that it's under acquisition, even though you're not actually purchasing the property. But I didn't know what your understanding was, or Conservation Commission's understanding was on that, or the state, how the state looks at it. I don't know. You know, that it's just a question I had as I looked at it. Because
Yeah,
I guess, yeah, the only other category is preservation, protect personal real property from injury, harm, or destruction. So maybe a CR would fit under preservation, that you're protecting the real property from destruction. You know, if it's a farm or a forest or, you know, that sort of thing.
right.
So I think it might matter if you were making an application, if you were supporting a project, it might matter what you called it, acquisition versus preservation. So just looking for guidance on that.
You know, I think the part that we're going to be looking at with certain types of applications is this notion of no supplanting of general municipal revenue and no maintenance or operating expenses.
Mhm.
So, you know, is rental of a facility to house historic collection an operating expense? You know, that's what'll happen. We'll get applications and we'll get better at this as time passes, as you know. But with an application, the reason we're asking for the pre-application is to have people not spend a hell of a lot of time in the process of gathering data and information, and but just to come to us, say, here's my general idea, will this work? And then we go to the consortium and say, you know, we're confused about this one. It's gray to us. How do we interpret this? And they give us feedback as to how it could fit into the guidelines of what we've got in our plan, or how they would think it wouldn't fly with the way the state interprets the use of CPA funds. So initially, there's going to be, in my mind anyway, some trial and error where people come in with proposals and we say, okay, let us check it out. You know, the committee doesn't have enough track record yet to be able to say yes or no, and we'll find out and get back to you quickly. And then if it's a valid application, then you go forward with your final.
Mm. Yeah, I'm perfectly content with more will be revealed. And I think, in fact, as you know, as you gain experience, that is what will happen. And I like that pre-application part of the plan, because it does let people make their mistakes and get them corrected before you bring it to the town.
Now, in regard to your first question, the committee has talked about the whole use of funds. And of course, you know, 10% is going to those individual subsections automatically on an annual basis. So those funds are available for use by historic preservation, housing, or rec and open space. And if they come up with a proposal, they can go to town meeting with that. And you know, I would expect in a lot of cases, those funds would be used up on an annual basis, unless one of those entities decided that they wanted to sort of carry money forward for a couple of years for a bigger project that they foresaw down the road. As for the bigger pool, Hudson, for instance, is in a position now where they don't spend the money they received this year. They are only spending money that they've already got in the bank. So it's not the estimated money that they're anticipating as revenue in fiscal 22, perhaps, or the estimated amount that they're getting from the state that they're spending at that annual town meeting. They're spending money that they've had from the preceding year. But they've been in the business for 15 years or so. So they've had a chance to move into that schedule. Whereas, we're just using this initial money. And do we think everybody's going to utilize everything that's available? This first time around, it's hard to say. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't.
It's certainly not a stated goal.
Right. And ultimately it's, if the committee decides the projects don't have merit, we're going to say, we're not taking this to town meeting. And that might mean that some of that money gets held for a future year. And I think often it may very well be that someone's got a bigger project down the road that they want to see funded, and they ask that money be banked and not expended in that particular fiscal year.
Sure, but so Tim, if I'm understanding, just to play back what you said about the 10-10-10 that's stated as an obligation, the historic open space and what's the third?
Housing.
Housing, thank you, yeah. So to you, your understanding is that if there was maybe not enough money or the project wasn't ripe, that you could accumulate it and you wouldn't have to spend that 10% in a given year. You could say, we're going to put it aside for a project that we're working towards.
Oh, definitely.
Okay,
And that money is protected. Once it goes into that 10% pool, it can't be taken away from that
okay,
use, that
okay,
it's there. So it's not like you can dip into that and slide it over into, if it's in housing, you don't slide it over into historic preservation. That's targeted for historic preservation or housing or whatever, and it's going to stay there. And that collects and collects and collects. It doesn't roll back into the general fund.
okay. Okay, so it does sound like you don't have to spend the full amount every year, even if you did it like Hudson did, you still have discretion as a committee, bringing it to town meeting, and then of course the town has the discretion not to spend.
Yep, the town could say no, and then that money stays with CPA, but if it's not designated for one of those buckets, essentially, it goes back into the general pool to be attached at a later time.
Okay. So if you're outside of those three categories, you can't accumulate over multi-years.
Money that's outside of the 10% can be targeted in a given year and not expended and be held by that use for a future time.
As long as it's one of those three uses.
Yep.
So you could take the 70% and add it to the 10 and say, this year we're going to put 80% of the money into, a historic preservation project, for example. And then it could roll forward if it needed to.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
That's the
very
way
helpful.
I interpret it. Everybody feel comfortable with that explanation?
Yes, definitely.
And does that need to be in the plan? I mean, do you tell people, I don't know that it needs to be in, but that was one of my starting questions too, is whether we're telling people in the plan how it actually works in a way that might inform how they write a project proposal or a pre-application. I'm not using the right words here. Pre-application, is it? Yeah.
So let me see if this CPA requires that at least 10% of the CPA funds received in each fiscal year be spent or reserved for each of the CPA's three main purposes: open space and recreation, historic resources, and affordable housing. So 10%'s got to go to those, either to be expended or to be held on an annual basis. 5% can go to this committee for administrative costs. Any money we don't spend out of that 5% rolls back at the end of the year to the general fund balance of CPA. So it doesn't leave CPA. It just, we don't accumulate money for administrative costs. And administrative costs could be an appraisal on a piece of land or, that sort of thing. So it's probably prudent for us to hold that 5% because we really don't know what we haven't done this enough to be able to say, that $25,000 wouldn't be necessary. It might very well be necessary. We might have to hire an appraiser or a consultant for a certain evaluation of a project, whatever. CPA funds that are not expended in one year may be banked or carried over to subsequent years. However, once CPA funds are banked for a specific purpose, they must ultimately be used for that purpose for which they were banked. The remaining 70% of CPA funds in each fiscal year are available to be appropriated or banked according to the town's discretion. And, you know, in addition, subject to certain restrictions, up to 5% of the CPA. So, I mean, I think that's, I don't know as we can get any more specific than that this first time around until we've experienced this a little, but essentially what that's saying is we have to put 10% in each of those three buckets. The other can be banked into those buckets or, you know, held in there's a fourth account essentially that, again, as I said, allows us access to those funds through the year. And then at the end of the year, if those unspecified funds that are in that fourth category aren't utilized at a town meeting that occurs later down the road, they go back into our general fund again,
Okay,
but it still stays as CPA money.
sure. Yeah, that makes, I had no doubt about that. Were you reading from something in the act or were you reading from something?
I'm
that's in
reading from the
draft?
plan.
Oh, what page are you on?
Oh, God.
Because I missed, either I missed it or I read it long enough ago that I forgot it.
It must have been page 2.
Page 2, okay.
Yep. Does that help, Mary?
Yeah, yes, it does. So it's the introduction. So there are guidelines here then, if somebody was looking for the plan to say, well, how do you use the funds? And it does say that the money is returned to the general CPA fund if not. So that tells me and others that, no, you don't have to spend it every year. The full amount of whatever's in the fund.
Right. And then later on, in the guidelines for submission on page 19, we say, if the request is part of a multi-year project, applications should include the total project cost, timeline, and allocation. So
Yeah.
I think that alludes to the fact that you could have perhaps a land acquisition proposal that there's not enough money in CPA and other funds that the town has to accomplish the task this year, but the goal is to take what the town is willing to expend this year and add on some additional funds next year. And I think one of the things that we talked about at capital planning the other night was setting up a link with your, what do you call it? You call it your capital improvement request form. So if somebody's going to come to CPA to use CPA money for a capital expense, they need to be talking to the capital planning committee as well. And as you pointed out, it'd be helpful for us to develop links within our plan that show people how to get to the master plan or the open space plan or any of those. It'd be helpful to them to be able to get to that link in capital planning, because they're going to have to be talking to capital planning. They may very well be trying to accomplish funding from a couple sources the same way you would with open space acquisition, perhaps.
Right. That's I think that's a good idea. Would be helpful, Tim. Definitely. Yeah, I think I just read this too fast. So it's in there. This is the kind of guideline that on the spending that I think is helpful.
Yeah, MJ made sure that was in there.
MJ, well, of course he did. He's the,
That was,
he's
that was
the,
his task.
what is it? The master of the spreadsheets? No, it's the, what is it, MJ? I forget your title on the spreadsheets. Yeah.
Oh, I don't even recall. It's been a while since I played with those spreadsheets.
Yeah, all right, all right.
I do miss those.
Yeah.
Mary,
Anyway,
other questions?
No, thank you. I can take my hand down if Carolyn's got other hands up and, oh, I do that. I lower my
yep.
hand, right?
Yes. I can lower it for you if you'd like.
Oh, she did it. Okay, all right.
And Walter's got another question, so we can bring him back up.
All right, so we're gonna send Mary back. Gonna lower her hand and we're gonna bring Walter back. All right, Walter, you're up.
Okay, couple of thoughts. Number one, the selectmen have quite a bit of power over what a couple of our groups want to do. For example, the highway barn on Carter Street is now vacant because we have a brand new extravagant highway barn up on Route 62. So that leaves an enormous amount of space for a collection. For example, a few years ago, I had 11 horse-drawn pieces of equipment ranging from a $3,500 Keen sleigh that came out of the Tyler farm to a number of buggies and sleighs and whatever that could have been protected by the historical commission. I think this type of thing needs to be looked at. You get the highway barn, you've got the fire barns on West Street, empty buildings that quite a collection could be housed in. So I think it's important to keep that in mind when we're doing these things. So there's a lot of space in town, a lot of empty space that could house a lot of important historical and recreational and whatever type of things that would benefit the town. So it's important to keep that in mind. It isn't just this group, the Community Preservation Committee, that's going to do everything good. The selectmen have a opportunity to really help the town out also. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Yeah, there's actually discussion right now with Margaret, with some other folks about excess structures in town and town-owned buildings that might be utilized for other purposes. So they're getting some assistance with that from, I think they're working with Central Mass on it right now. Any other questions? Any other thoughts from the committee?
Oh, June Miller just raised her
Oh,
hand.
June, good for you.
All right, June, you're on.
Okay, thank you. In the addendum number 2, which gives supplemental information for historic preservation that I had a chance to look at today. On the second page under deed restrictions, the very first thing it says is that the CPA requires an historic preservation deed restriction as a condition of funding if the historic resource is being acquired by the town. You know, both the town hall and the Bullard House are owned by the town. They are both on the National Register, but there's no deed restriction that I know of. Is that something that we have to do retroactively if we ask for money for either one of those structures?
Huh. So you'd be saying the town already owns it. It doesn't
Right.
have the restriction. And if you wanted to utilize funding for some particular project at either of those sites, does a deed restriction have to come into play?
Yeah,
We'll find out.
Right,
Okay.
my experience with conservation would say probably yes, and it's probably a good idea. You know, if the town owns a piece of land that is designated conservation land, but it doesn't have a conservation restriction on it, at some point in the future, there may be a body of people in the town office, you know, in the powers that be, so to speak, that choose to sell it for an apartment. So if it's not, if there's not a document that's gonna outlast the people who've made the current decisions, those decisions can be changed
right.
in the future. So, you know, to put a historic restriction on the Bullard House would guarantee that in 50 years, it's not going to be sold.
Right.
So, and I would imagine no matter who the owner is, that the state would want to see that happen.
Okay.
It's a guess, but, you know, an educated
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking that we would just have to do it, even though it's already been, you know, town property.
Right. Right. But town cut property doesn't mean that it is reserved just for that use.
I have another silly little question for page 1 of that addendum number 2 for historic preservation. There's an abbreviation, the CCPC. Is that,
Oh, that,
is
yeah,
it a goof?
that's an error.
Okay, so
We'll
it means
We'll change
CPAC.
it. That's Canton Community Preservation Commission, because this is a document that is in their plan. And
okay,
it's one that we decided we probably wanted to identify and look up. So it'll say, this will say Community Preservation Act Committee, CPAC.
okay,
Thank you. No, good
Okay.
catch.
all right, thanks.
Thank you, June.
And we should probably say the property has been determined by the Canton Historical Commission. We'll change that to Berlin.
So we have 2 other hands in the audience.
Oh, good. Well, let's take Barry because he hasn't talked yet, and then we'll go back to Walter.
Excellent. Barry, you are good to go.
It is typical anytime that the state spends money on a historic property that they want a preservation restriction on that property to the Massachusetts Historical Commission. That's a typical thing that they do anytime they grant state money toward a project. And I suspect they do a similar thing with CPA money, since it includes state funds also. So that is a typical kind of thing. And they execute them anytime you do a project like this. You execute that kind of a restriction on the property so that it remains restricted. I might add that it might not necessarily restrict it to stay in its present ownership, but it does restrict it in terms of it being preserved.
Correct.
You could sell a piece of property that has a preservation restriction on it, but you can't get rid of that. Doesn't get rid of the restriction. The restriction follows the deed.
Yep. Yeah, it's the same with conserved land.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything else, Barry?
No, I'm set.
All right, Walter again.
And go ahead, Walter.
Okay, just a quick point. On the CRs, I initiated actually a few years ago, donating a CR to the Sudbury Valley trustees on lands that we had bought. And that gives a double layer of protection to that land. Land that the town has bought and put in conservation can be taken out of conservation to build a highway department, to build a police department, to build a basketball court or anything. But
Where'd you go? Walter, you're muted all of a sudden.
Well, I think his point is he's agreeing with you in regard to this CR and the reason that this, again, in the language that we have, it says any land that the town acquires has to have a CR on it.
Right.
So I think
Yeah.
he's.
Right, I think he was also saying that, you know, the conservation land has, because Sudbury Valley trustees also holds a conservation restriction, even if the town decided,
Right,
Sudbury Valley trustees would have to also decide, and being a land trust, that would be against their charter. So, it does add a second layer of protection.
and that's a guideline that the Conservation Commission is using, so it's
Yeah, that's standard practice for
right.
us.
So
Yeah.
that's a good to know.
Yeah.
Walter, did you have anything else? Have we lost you? You're muted right now, it says, so. All right, we've lost Walter. Anyone else with questions or comments? Anna, you're the only one sitting in the wings, so just in case. Oh, look at that. Is she gonna raise her hand?
I don't think so.
Oh, nice try.
Oh, yes, she did.
Hey, Anna. Let's bring Anna in.
All right, Anna.
Hello.
Hi, Anna.
Hello.
Hi. I really have nothing to say. I just wanted to pay attention to what was going on.
Yeah, good. Well, you were the only one not to participate, so we felt a little guilty, so.
Oh, I was participating just
Yeah,
from a
no, well,
distance.
we've got your voice and recorded now, so that's good.
Oh, good.
Thank you for participating.
You're welcome. This has been fascinating.
Well, as you guys pointed out last night, Anna and Mary were at the traffic safety advisory committee meeting, and because they're on the committee, and they pointed out that they control the purse strings from some other directions. So here they are again. So got to be nice to those folks.
Always.
Other questions from the committee? I did send around this addendum, and I think if we modify the pieces here that I just pulled from Canton, we can include it as an addendum because it helps to clarify the requirements that are needed to meet some of the historic preservation project requirements. So if the committee's content with that, we can add that as an addendum too.
Would you like a motion?
Yeah, probably be a good idea.
I make a motion that we include the addendum pertaining to historical what?
Preservation projects.
Preservation projects.
A second.
And we'll do a roll call. Carolyn,
Aye.
Elaine,
Aye.
Julie,
Bye.
MJ,
Aye.
and I vote aye, so that's unanimous. Thank you. And other thoughts from anybody? It's
No.
8:38. Is that what it is?
Yep.
Yeah. If we have a motion, we can close the hearing.
So moved.
In a second,
Second,
so we'll do a roll call on that. Carolyn,
Aye.
Elaine,
Aye.
MJ,
aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Tim, aye. So it's unanimous. We've closed the hearing. Thank you all for participating. Those of you that tuned in. We appreciate your thoughts, and I think you've added some good contributions that we'll take into account as we finalize this document.
For this year.
Now, we've added the addendum. The other piece that's been suggested is doing something with linkages, which I think makes perfect sense. Everybody feel comfortable with that?
Definitely.
So that would be to plans like the housing production plan, the open space plan, the master plan. What are the other?
Are there any housing?
There's the
Plans.
housing production plan. That's going to be updated in 2022, but the current one is still active.
And then does historical have any plan, master plan kind of document?
We have documents, but not a full master plan.
Is there anything you think we should draw a link to in the preservation plan?
Not at the moment.
Okay. I mean, the conservation plan ties into the rec, the open space plan has a rec element to it, so that's under your umbrella anyway.
Right.
The master plan includes an economic development component. The master plan has a housing component, and then the housing production plan is a standalone document that sort of goes further, particularly focused on affordable housing. But we can certainly, I think, maybe as a resource sort of at the end of the document, we can say, these are the documents that we reviewed, and if you'd like to review them yourself, here's the link that draws you to that. So that would be townofberlin.com with the notion that they can go to the particular pages, huh?
Right. I like it.
So we redraft this. When do we want to meet again?
So when do we accept this as our final plan?
Well, I would assume that we do it as soon as we can, and that would mean if we meet in fairly short order, if we can, these changes aren't too significant.
Right.
I mean, we could turn these around in no time, really. So it depends on people's availability, but then if finalize the plan and people can start to utilize it. I know there's folks waiting in the wings with applications so, you know.
Okay, so should we meet next week? What's today? Yeah, Tuesday. All
Right, I could do next Tuesday.
right, let me look.
That's the night before school starts, though. Isn't it?
School starts Monday.
School starts Monday. Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. School starts early.
Tuesday. I can't
MJ,
do-
what happens to you on Tuesdays? Not a good night?
I work, so I mean, I could pop in again, especially if we need a quorum.
It's gonna be quick. Elaine?
Fine.
Tuesday's fine.
I can't do Tuesday.
You can't.
Oh,
No, we have school committee meeting Tuesday
Okay.
and it should be so.
yay, yay you. So Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Yep.
The following week, the 7th, 8th, or 9th.
Well, I mean, the other
Uh,
thing is that Julie, nothing that we're talking about here is substantial. If you're comfortable, we could, those of us that could get together on Tuesday could just go ahead and get this approved, so it's finalized.
That sounds great.
And you could certainly, we'll send around the draft final copy before that meeting. So if you had any questions, you could certainly send them along to us. Is
Okay.
that all right with you?
Yeah, that's smart. Yep.
Because
Right,
if
so-
if the four of us can make it, we've got a quorum.
Right.
Right,
Perfect.
so
Second.
so James just texted me now. He was on his way back from a meeting in Maine and his phone died. So we're talking next Tuesday, the 31st, correct?
Right, 7:30.
Yeah, so I'm gonna see if he can make it.
Yep.
All right. See what he says. And then MJ, that takes the pressure off of you if he can make it.
Alright.
I should be able to.
Oh,
Yes.
never mind, he logged on. Hold on. Let me promote him.
Really, he logged on. Look at that.
I know.
He's a good egg.
Isn't he?
Yes.
He is.
James, I don't care what they say about you. You're all right.
Sorry, I was gonna do this on the way home. I was looking at a house in Maine and I was gonna do it on the way home. My phone died. I just got back to the house and just got on a charger.
Yeah.
I-
We're talking about getting together next Tuesday at 7:30.
As long as I can get a sitter, because my wife's in Egypt next Tuesday, but yes, I can do it.
It's a real quick one. It's only going to take us 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
It's basically to,
And
take
look,
it-
I had you, I don't know if you see this, I had you guys on the calendar and with Maine, and I was supposed to get you on the way home. It was on there.
we had a
You're-
good time.
You're funny.
I'm
Well,
trying.
you can
I'm
catch
trying.
it, you can catch up on YouTube also, so,
Yeah. that's
Okay. I'll check it out.
Riveting.
yeah.
right.
All right, next
we'll make those
Tuesday,
changes.
7:30.
Okay.
And we'll get that around to everybody. And then if people have additional thoughts, but I mean, I think the important thing now is to button it up, get it out and let people start utilizing it. So,
Love it. Great job. Really great job, everyone.
well, I mean, it's been a great joint effort. I mean, everybody doing their part on these different sections and representing their particular interest groups has been great. So
Sure. For sure. For sure.
worked out well.
Yeah.
And judging from the comments from the public, the 6 that attended anyway, the 5, we weren't too far astray, so that worked.
Right.
out.
Yeah, no, there weren't very many questions that the document didn't answer, so that was good.
So I'll get in touch with June. I'll do the CP3 thing and we'll get this cleaned up and sent around as a final, and then everybody, if they want to comment before Tuesday, if they've got any changes, let us know, and otherwise we'll finalize it then. And sorry, Julie, that's just the way it's going to be.
That's okay. No problem. I trust what you guys are doing.
Good. A motion to adjourn
So moved.
Yeah.
in a second.
Second.
Thank you. And then a roll call, Carolyn,
Aye.
Elaine,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
MJ,
Aye.
and James,
Aye.
and Tim is aye. So thank you all. And thank you, Eloise.